Welcome to Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. My name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. Our objective is to enthuse, inspire, energize, and empower entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of all stripes here in BW and beyond. We do so by inviting these entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs into our makeshift studio. Sometimes we call them to the restaurant, sometimes we go to our studio, and we ask them to share their experiential knowledge, their experiences and their expertise, and we ask them as many questions as we can, aimed at empowering you also as a viewer. Hello dear viewer, dear listener, my name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. Welcome once again to an exciting episode of Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast, where we bring life-changing education all the time. And this time I want us to talk about the bigger picture. And for that reason, I've invited an economist to the studio, Mr. Maatla Kgasa, to talk about all things economics having to do with entrepreneurship. Would you care to introduce yourself and share your educational background for the benefit of the viewer, sir?
Okay. Thank you for having me, sir. It's an honor to be on this platform. So I'm Maatla Kgasa. I studied economics at the University of Botswana. I'm also a candidate simmer. I'm also an author. I run a company called Sunvest. It's a research and business advisory company which happens to incubate SMEs also. I also happen to be an author. I try to balance between being an intellectual and a creative. It's very difficult, but I happen to be more of an intellect. I would like to assume, yeah. So I happen to do a lot.
So in terms of economics, what have you delved into on the area of economics?
Usually there's the macro and the micro. I happen to love the confines of like our economy, right? For instance, how we can use the policies at our hand and the initiatives that the government can roll out to better our country.
And you write extensively. Which publications have you written? Or have you written books?
I've written columns and articles. On the other side of the creative side, fiction, that is where I happen to have written books. I haven't actually written books on the aspect of economics, but on the other side. But in terms of columns, newspapers, articles, and also going to radios like Duma FM, Erna FM, that is where I happen to do more of that part.
Okay. So normally you talk on economy in general. Today we're going to talk about entrepreneurship as a catalyst for citizen economic empowerment and economic diversification. Can you help us understand the topic, first of all?
I think one of the most important things that we have seen is how, as the world continues to evolve and human beings get better, we realize that the only thing that we have is ourselves. That is why I feel like entrepreneurship is the only pathway that we have to bettering our own country. The government can only do much, but I think as individuals, it's where now you say, oh, the government has done its developmental part. I think now it's us as entrepreneurs now to chart a pathway of entrepreneurship. That is why I happen to say that as a mixed economy in Botswana, the government does its part, but also the mixed part comes whereby now as individuals, as citizens, now we come together and also play our part.
Okay. I've heard people use the word mixed economy in the context of capitalism with an element of socialism. Are we mixed in that sense as well?
I think we are mixed, but more inclined to socialism. I think the government does a lot, while also I happen to hold the view that the government can also be capitalist. I think the government has been very socialist by doing a lot of things for free for people. But I think now it's time for the government to be the entrepreneur. There are so many opportunities in our country that no individual has the capital skills to actually invest in, but the government can actually be the entrepreneur. I think that is the next part that we have to chart. Right?
Yeah, I've never heard the government being thought of as an entrepreneur, but I can see what you're saying. Are there any specific foundational things the government has to do to assume that? Because I've heard last year Ramatseka saying we are pushing to go from public sector-led economy to a private sector-led economy. Is that the sort of thing you're talking about?
Very true. There's a farm called Milk Dairy which has been continuously changing hands of ownership. It's one of the largest dairy
What's it called?
Dairy milk or milk dairy, something of that sort. So it was created by BDC to help augment our milk consumption and also try and reduce imports. So now the government wants the farm to be run by entrepreneurs. I like to believe that no, government, I think that now you have seen that this company has changed hands so many times. Why not just be the entrepreneur and run it? There's capital intensive, there's so much bureaucracy, things that the government can actually bypass quicker than any other investor.
Okay. Are you basing this model on any country where the government is the entrepreneur?
I think that China has done very well in that aspect. They are communist, but most of the companies that we see in Botswana actually own, rather in Botswana, that are Chinese, are owned by the government. The government is the entrepreneur, whereby the government can say, look, let me make money to fund the hospitals, the schools, the roads, because we realize that I think entrepreneurs can only, in their own right, as individuals, we can only carry the country to a certain degree or angle, and then the government has to try and carry forward.
Okay. You say that we must relentlessly pursue. One of the points you discuss is the relentlessly pursue a diversified economy. What do you mean, and how do we go about doing that?
I think I started primary school in the early 2000s, and one of the first terms that I got to hear on the radio was economic diversification, which is like 20 years ago. So now it has been more or less of a rhetoric. We had the 2008 financial crisis, and then now we have COVID-19, whereby diamonds are affected. Basically 60-70% of our revenues are affected. So now more than ever, it has become very visible, like the importance of why we need to diversify the economy.
It's become imperative.
Very imperative. There are various sectors that play a minimal role, but they have a lot of, I think they have a lot of potential. This is where now we say, look, I think diamonds have carried us so far. What is the next avenue? Our beef industry has crumbled. With COVID-19 now, we see that tourism also has its own perks, which now I think the next path is either manufacturing or agriculture. I feel like when we diversify, we have to sit down and say, look, what are the very things that we use on a normal basis, right? We don't use diamonds. Diamonds are luxury. So food, agriculture, and manufacturing, those are the key things that I feel like those are our next path.
And in terms of that relentless pursuit, how do we convince or energize entrepreneurs to get into manufacturing and farming and agriculture?
If you read our citizen economic empowerment policy, and then we also have this thing where we say we want foreign direct investment. We have these policies that continue to polarize each other. One, we're going to say, as the government, we want to give citizens a chance to run the economy because for a long time they have been excluded. And then we also go for abroad and say, as foreigners, we have opportunities in our country, which means now this policies are clashing because we want foreigners to come, and then also we want citizens to run the economy. Also, right now, also we have another policy.
You can't have them side by side, or
I think that it has proved to be very difficult. I'll try and break it down. So let's say that we are able to diversify the economy through foreigners. You go abroad to Dubai, India, and then you get foreigners to come and help diversify the economy through foreign direct investment, right? Which means now the economy is going to be in the hands of few foreigners. And then we have to now chart another path to citizen economic empowerment and then wrestle the economy from people that we want abroad to say, hey guys, come, right? That is why I say that we continue to have a clash of ideologies and policies. I believe that citizen economic empowerment can be, I think it's the best pathway we have to economic diversification.
Okay. But still on those clash of ideas, you say we have in any case failed to attract FDI, foreign direct investment. What are the reasons for that failure?
I think that it has to do with a lot of bureaucracies. That is one. Also the government...
In the sense that?
In the sense that to set up a business or industry is a very lengthy process. We have a lot of parastatals who are doing a lot of things. You have to go to layer, go to BDC, go to revenue, while you could actually have a one-stop unit that happens to offer all the services. I think another path has to be the use of capital and land. right? So, for instance, we will start with a policy which is called, there's a new policy right now which is called the Economic Transformation and Recovery Act, right? So it comes at a time whereby we have realized that we have to transform the economy. That's why.
When did that policy come into being?
Just I think during this COVID season. So now it's a transformation and recovery, right? And also we are saying that we have to bring foreign investors. So there's been a long-term clash of ideas and procedures and policies. This is a very difficult thing to try and break down because, for instance, I want to give you an example like America, right? In 2008, when we had the financial crisis, Obama had something which he called the Economic Recovery Act, whereby he introduced a 2.3 trillion stimulus to stimulate the economy.
Focused mostly on the banks and on the auto industry.
On the banks and the auto industry, right? But most of the benefits were only seen under Donald Trump, which means now we have, now coming back to us,
Trump was claiming all the credit.
Trump was claiming all the credit. So coming back to us, you see that was a long-term policy. So we happen to have this short-term policies in our country to try and adjust or solve problems that are long-term, right? So we have ESP, we have EDD, all these monetary things that happen to work against the things that we want to do.
Okay, now the government's failure to strike a perfect balance in its development mandate and in initiating an investmental approach. This is exactly what you talked about, but to go as far as to call it a failure, can we call it a failure?
I think that the government has failed. I was talking to a friend of mine, is an analyst in one company in CBT. He was saying that there was a time when DBS was selling their stake in Dapsona, right? And he was saying, but why didn't the government actually just buy out DBS instead of like Anglo-American coming to Botswana and say, look, guys, there's an opportunity here. We want to invest, right? So I believe that as the government, our revenues are drying up because we are a small country. One, we don't have a lot of economic activity outside diamonds and agriculture, right? Which means as the government now you need money to fund the socialist programs, education, health.
I don't think the government considers itself socialist. They may be practicing socialism, but they don't believe they are socialist.
I think they might not really, in ideology, they might not really be identify themselves as socialist, but in principle and in practice, they actually are, because we believe we have to send students to school from primary school to tertiary, right? You have to build houses for staff. You have to do all these things that, in essence, they are not free. They are free, but they're not free. They have to be paid by somebody else, which is now the government. There has to be somewhere where this money is coming from. And recently, our revenues have been drying up, which means now we have to come up with other ways to augment the revenue that we have been having. So we have, that's why I say that we have to balance our investmental approach and our developmental approach. I want to pick an example like BDC.
Maybe you should define that. What is the developmental approach? One is investmental approach. So and then you'll give the BDC example, but let's understand it first.
So a developmental aspect is usually just the simple, straightforward thing of whereby the government sees the needs of citizens and the community, and then they just chart direct path of saying, look, you guys need 1, 2, 3, 4, or maybe through the population census and say, okay, Gaborone now has a population of 500,000 people, which means now we need another hospital. So it's just based on the needs of citizens, and
based on the population.
Based on the population, there's no rate of return, there's no profit. Otherwise, on the other hand, the developmental mandate is whereby the government says, I can provide certain services and I can also do certain things, but I will have to charge you for them. That is why I happen to pick the BDC as an example. I think their mandate over the years has changed, where now they were formed as an institute that was to develop and fund businesses, but right now they've taken a role of an investment agent or investment manager, because now you'll see them buying stakes in companies that are already existing or giving people to people who already have money, right? For instance, if you want to develop company, if you want to develop the economy, You shouldn't be focusing on acquisitions. You want to start by building and funding early stage entrepreneurs, startups, all those businesses that have to get into
that have huge potential for growth,
and then get into the mainstream economy, right? So if you fund acquisitions measures, those businesses are already existing. They only need to maximize profit and perhaps even increase the net worth of the owners. That is why I think that we have to focus more on the lower end entrepreneurs. So that is when I say BDC has changed its mandate, so perhaps they need to realign.
Now, in focusing on the lower end entrepreneurs, isn't where the Botswana Innovation Hub comes in? Isn't that where CEDA comes in? Isn't that where NDB comes in? And even Leah?
That's a very good question, because I happen to have my own thoughts on how we can actually go about with things like Botswana Innovation Hub. So these things are what I call a research institute, right? But they happen to be way outside the very people that B3 and then Botswana Innovation Hub. I'm of the view that they should be hosted by a university, right? So B3 and Botswana Innovation Hub should either be a division or department under university, because that is where you have graduates, you have students who have so much time on their hands. They also need researchers, platforms, supervisors who can actually help them create prototypes, develop apps, products with resources that are at their disposal. So right now you want to take Botswana Innovation Hub, take it to Botswana, like at
almost by the airport.
Yeah, so now you can imagine for students who want to innovate, who stays in Klopeng or even out of the country, sorry, out of the town. So you see now we're creating all these great institutions, but we also
is it not modeled after a Silicon Valley type of concept?
And that is another thing. We happen to import first world class ideas to try and implement them in a third world country, right? So that is a huge challenge. That is not how we have to go about things. We have to create solutions that are tailor-made for our own needs and wants.
Okay, the nature of our economic system. Teach us, sir.
So, like we were saying, the nature of our economic system is both mixed, which means it's private and also public. We see there are certain government institutions like Botswana Water Utilities, BPC, but also we happen to see where the government is also in business with individuals. For instance, BTC, where the government is actually a stakeholder. That's a form of mixed ownership. So the economy in itself is in the hands of both the government and individuals or private citizens and companies.
Well, I want to take you back to the idea of these, organizations like Botswana Innovation Hub and Leah. If you had, with a stroke of a pen, you could change them. Apart from just housing them, as you said, at university, what other changes would you propose?
I think one of the things that I would do, I would move CEDA out of Gaborone, because as the name says, it's a local enterprise authority, right? Which means it's for the
CEDA or Leah?
I'll start with Leah. So I would move CEDA.
Don't they have branches all over the country?
But the branches are more than office. For instance, in Kenya, the branch is just an office. While in Gaborone, they have a leather tannery warehouse, where they have a lot of warehouse where people can actually go study a lot of skills. So now we call it a local enterprise authority, because we understand that it's for the local economy, for the rural economy. But we have centralized it and placed it.
Local doesn't mean Botswana.
Local enterprise authority. That is why also
it means regional, the particular region.
So and then we have taken all these warehouses, factories where people can actually learn skills, and then put them in Gaborone. While we can actually go to Maung, where that we actually can do something with the skills. Another thing that I will do with CEDA, I think CEDA started a brilliant idea where they have this thing where tertiary schools do proposals and challenges. So I think for the younger population, one of the simplest ways to stimulate entrepreneurship is through competitions. I also saw you at Mr. Kutsafolo's Project 123.
Yeah, that was at the Stenbig.
Very true, because we, as young people, I think we believe in being incentivized. So I think that is where now Leah has.
Stenbig Hub, I think it's called.
Yeah, that is where I think now as entrepreneurs, I think as institutions, that is the best way to develop entrepreneurs and nurture local talent.
You give them facilities and you give them space to experiment.
experiment, develop prototypes, collaborate, all these things, and we have to start them as early as possible, like at a young age. I think that we have centralized a lot of things in Gaborone, but in Gaborone, it's a very fast city, so chance of you being able to innovate and do a lot of things while here, this is a very fast thing, you have to adapt. But while in Kanye or Tabong, it's very slow, so I can actually do things at my own time, my own space, and get lost in my creative element.
All right, let's talk about the role that can be played by the private sector in ushering the diverse economy. What can entrepreneurs do in the private sector?
Like I was saying, I think that the private sector has to go to the grassroots. I think junior school, primary school, senior school. I was telling a friend of mine that, for instance, we have to start developing entrepreneurs the way that we develop athletes, right? Because now you can imagine at 26, 25, Syria wants you to be able to write a comprehensive plan, but even 90% of students in a business faculty, they can't write a business plan. Which means now is the private sector has to now invest more in incubation hubs, in funding competitions that happen to develop talent. Just like we have a program called Rababona.
How does that work?
So Rababona in fact, it's a football initiative. So whereby students in primary school, junior school, form teams, they compete among each other, and then from there you have to pick the best 11, which happens to be the most talented out of the bunch. Because now we understand that competition breeds creativity. And also you have to incentivize that creativity. So I think that private institutions have a larger role to play. But also I don't know why our entrepreneurs or rather institutions don't have scholarships and initiatives just in their own right that happen to speak on upskilling and giving opportunities to younger people.
So how do you envision it working? I mean, this idea of training entrepreneurs the way you train athletes or soccer players, how do you envision it working in practice?
I'll give an example. South Africa, right? South Africa is one of the best countries when it comes to cricket and rugby, right? But when you go to China or USA, you'll never hear China or USA being mentioned in cricket. But while they have larger populations than USA, which means now even if we were to sample,
you mean China has a larger population
than China and the USA has a larger population than South Africa. But how come South Africa can actually develop the best cricket and rugby players? So they've created systems in place. They've created a culture of these sports. So that is the very thing that I think we have to do. So we have to create this business clubs, business competitions, camps, whereby just like I can go to a karate camp, as a student I can actually go to a business camp where I'm taught basic economic principles, how to spot a business opportunity, profit and loss account, all these simple things that at a young age, if they are embedded in me, when I'm 25, I can do everything. I think you have to systemize, you have to create a system whereby we make sure that there's a feeder into the entrepreneurship system.
Isn't universities such as ABM, are they not trying to do that by setting up an entrepreneurship departments and so on? Even UB has an entrepreneurial degree that is coming.
Oh, it's very like they say that you can't teach an old
dog new tricks.
Yeah. That's a very profound statement, because now at 20 I enter university at 2021, so already I have a perspective of life and the things that I want to do. So you want to teach me things at the age where now I want to do social media, I want to do a lot of things that are outside that. So I think that we happen to introduce a lot of things when it's too late, right? That is why we also know that when you look at athletes from primary school, there are various athletic competitions, trainings, because we understand that there should be a feeder into the Botswana Athletics Association thing, right? So now imagine we say, no, as entrepreneurs, we just want to try pay somewhere 25 years later and knowing how to run a business, knowing how to do all these things. So we have to educate, teach, and then develop.
I once raised that issue with a government official, and the response was they have a course called Development Studies, DVS, that grounds you on the basics of business.
Actually, I studied DVS at senior school. So actually, it's more of a economic subject than a business subject, right? Because it's the same development, right? So they just teach you basic.
It's too basic.
Yeah, it's very basic. focuses on the role of the government here and then the role of the private sector. Other than that, that's it.
So, what can we do, Mr. Kgasa, for these ideas to gain traction? What are you doing to publicize them, to agitate for them, and to promote them?
That is a very difficult question, because that is where now you have to involve a lot of politics, a lot of advocacy. So it's more or less of trying to find a common ground with stakeholders, perhaps developing a mutual beneficiary partnership and saying, guys, this is what you are doing, this is what we can come with. So I happen to also run an incubation hub. So one of the things that I do, that I happen to...
Where is it?
So it's actually here in Gaps. So one of the things that I do, I happen to work a lot with tertiary institutions, usually through seminars. I also happen to work, there are a lot of friends of mine who choose a different path of careers and looking for parasites, but they are very brilliant, right? So I happen to try and bring them on board to help all these kids, because they have the minds. Sometimes as a person you can have the idea, or you want to have an idea, but there's somebody else who can help.
They have
you.
a mindset of a professional, but they can teach somebody with a mindset of
and also they just have the mindset, like they have the ability to think outside the box, and also if you present them with a problem, they can solve it for you. So I happen to try and bridge the gap between like those who have ideas, then those who actually have the ability to expand and
so how do you become a part of that? How does the viewer participate in that?
I have a page called Sunvest Botswana. Also Sunvest Botswana. It's also one of the platforms where we get to share what we do. We also invite participants or people who are willing to join us, or who really need the help, or who need our services.
Yeah. So you charge for those services, obviously.
Sometimes we don't, because we understand where our people are coming from, right? So it's more or less of trying to balance between helping and also trying to stay afloat.
Yeah. Let's talk about protectionist policies, the protection of infant industries and the local economy. It sounds to me that you think that is important.
I think that it's important, whereby now the government realizes, look, we can't be importing water, we can't be importing toothpicks, we can't be importing cakes. So what's the next step?
I haven't seen local toothpicks. Are they there?
They're not there. They're not there. They're always saying that, guys, why are we actually importing toothpicks? So I'm just speaking to the idea that there are certain things that we're importing that we shouldn't be importing. But the only way that the government can actually do is to close the borders and say, look, guys, we're going to close the border. So if you have any capabilities of doing 1, 2, 3, 4, we are giving you the access to the market, because we know that the shops, the restaurants, they need all those things. So by sealing the border, we're actually opening up the market for you. So these are very important policies that happen to protect small industries. Also, for instance, as somebody who maybe manufactures water, you can compete with international companies who can enjoy economies of scale, who can employ more people and qualify for funds.
Well, how do you reconcile that protectionist approach to the Africa Free Trade Agreement, which has just been signed, which has in effect opened the entire continent for entrepreneurs?
That's a very tricky question. Also, perhaps it speaks on the issue of trying to find balance. I think that before we are a continent, we are also countries.
Yeah, but we signed the treaty, we signed the agreement.
That's one of the things that I was speaking also is about the issue of global solidarity, right?
The issue of
global solidarity. Also, COVID-19 showed us that perhaps sometimes the idea of solidarity is very fallacious, in the sense that I think when things crumble, every country now draws back and says, hey guys, it's all about us. Just like we've seen with these people of us holding to the vaccine for themselves. So a bit of selfishness is going to come to play, because one, some of these countries, like South Africa for instance, they are more developed, they have manufactured, they have industries, and for us to catch up, we can't compete with them at the same level. So you have to try and...
But the argument is that the Africa Free Trade area is a huge benefit and a huge advantage for entrepreneurs, because you can optimize your prospects in Cairo, in Accra, and in Johannesburg, or anywhere in the world, in Gaborone. So, I mean, it's difficult for us to be arguing against that now.
Very true. I support the agreement, but also I happen to hold the view that even as before we are a continent, we are individuals, right? So sometimes before you take care of the streets, you have to take care of home.
Are you suggesting that we suspend the implementation?
No, we can't, right? Also, we can't because one way population of 2 billion people. And then now look at the
2 billion people, 2 million
no,
people.
like as in Botswana, just 2 million people, right?
Yeah,
and then now you imagine the possibilities of the African continent, which means now even if we are going to create economies, rather businesses within our economy, we can only grow to a certain level, which is now the next scale is to export to Africa, right? But we can't really focus on making the agreement successful at the expense of our own needs as a country.
So you're saying we should still protect infant industries, but still open up and invite competition and seek
especially
the market.
And by infant industries, I mean SMMEs or business in the country, which like the bulb world, right? Which is the only company in Botswana which is manufacturing bulbs. So now imagine now if you let another company from another country import bulbs into the country, right? So we are importing jobs, we are importing a lot of things, because now once you let a country, a bigger country with more resources, more skilled manpower export to you, that factory is going to close, right? So now you have to strike a balance between protecting.
Is Master Ahmed thinking of protecting bulbs? Or it's something you would urge her to do?
Oh, that's a difficult thing, because actually I feel that South Africa is actually poaching that company to go to Northwest. They actually approach him with huge benefits and incentives. And look,
so he's tempted to go to South Africa?
I think that is going to go.
Unless can't we do the same to keep him?
That's difficult, because you can imagine Northwest province is like the country. So imagine now you own a province which has a population more than a country. So now the markets. So unless if it's going to be wide enough to look, I can be both. I can set up in South Africa. I can also set up in Botswana. That is also dangerous for also protectionist in businesses, because sometimes bigger countries can start pushing entrepreneurs and.
Okay, so how can we build high caliber and high grade entrepreneurs?
I think that I don't know why you are the only person who's doing what you are doing, whereby you can actually, you have a platform, you are very seasoned entrepreneurs, rather you are a very seasoned entrepreneur, you happen to hold multiple portfolios, but also you are not shy of sharing what you do. Somebody was saying that I think the most expensive thing that you can share with somebody is knowledge, right? And then our entrepreneurs are not doing that. I think which makes me mad, because that is the very thing that we need to be doing. One, we need to have platforms.
Well, there's a handful who are doing it through the likes of Angel Network Botswana. Through, I mean, I'm certainly available to speak to any audience if I'm invited. So you're right. There are others who are reluctant, possibly because of cultural considerations. People think that what about buy chupa? They want to. They got about. There's that mentality. So how do you handle that? How do you really?
I think I love the idea of like cultural and cultural ideologies, whereby we think that sometimes when you're doing something, you're attracting attention to yourself. But so the idea of culture is now where we have to re-engineer our people's thinking, right? That is why also I believe that we have to create a culture of entrepreneurship, even in schools, junior schools, senior schools. So by the time that I finish tertiary schools, I'm a seasoned entrepreneur, right? So even today, before I started this thing, I would go to some of my classmates or rather mates who studied business course in university. They couldn't even help me with writing proposals. Now you can imagine where graduates of the highest institution are not able to write a fully fledged proposal. So what do
you're suggesting they just cram for the exam and they don't really internalize the knowledge?
Very true. Also, it just speaks on the modules that we are taught, right? Even right now, that's why I happen to love economics a lot. For instance, if you go to university right now, you're going to find a lecture using COVID-19 as a case study, saying, okay, how has COVID-19 affected the economy? But then if you go to some other faculties, they're still using case studies of 1990 or 2000, which is now our education lacks currency, like, right? So we're still teaching students that by the time they get out of the university, now we're dealing with another pandemic or crisis. So that's.
So as an economist who's also an entrepreneur, how do we guard against that trap?
The trap of
you know, we gave an example of a faculty moving forward with the current case study when the rest of the other faculties are still stuck in the past?
I think that we also have to change our economy, rather our educational system. I was told that some degrees take 10, 15 years to be updated. I don't know if it's a costful exercise or it's just that we don't have the
Changing the curriculum?
No, like not really changing it, but updating it.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because for instance, right now, imagine in 20 years, every year maybe 100 graduates with degrees in computer science graduate, right? And by the time that module doesn't even have virtual reality, it doesn't have augmented reality, right?
It doesn't have AI.
It doesn't have AI, but now you're actually studying computer science. So it's 2020, you graduate with a degree in computer science.
By the time you get out, nobody's
doing what you are doing. Which means now we have to do this thing of introducing modules every semester, new modules which deals with the very thing that is happening currently, right? So I think it speaks on the issue of having to update our curriculum.
Is it not also to do with the quality of lecturers we have? We don't take lecturers from industry. We have people who are full-time academics as a full-time career.
Very true. That's why also I happen to be against schoolers running certain ideas, because first, as a schooler, your thinking is only limited.
Scholar or academic, you mean?
Oh, you are a scholar, yes.
Yes.
Your only thinking is limited to the classroom, right? But then if you were to take somebody who has worked maybe in the private sector and then say, look, I want you to educate or I want you to lecture, I think that thinking is more broad. So it's also another problem with the way that universities happen to recruit lecturers.
Okay. Now, you want us to talk also about the effect of an increase in levies and taxes. That one is very close to my heart because I understand that VAT is about to be increased to 14%. So as an economist, what is the impact of that in the wider economy?
I happen to not agree with the increment right now. I feel like it was too soon, like looking at the impact of COVID-19 on the economy, right? However, now you want to take more money from people, which means now you are reducing disposable incomes, right? So, but also the government is doing that because of the shortage of revenue. So they want to use all those fees to augment the inability to collect revenues and also diversify the economy, right? So I think that businesses are going to struggle for foreseeable future, because now when you introduce VAT, it means that I'm paying more for less. Service fees, when you go to government departments, overseas, now have to pay more for these things. All these things are increasing, but while also our incomes are becoming stagnant.
Are we helpless as entrepreneurs to maybe fight against that or to agitate against these increases? Or is there something we can do?
I think we were helpless in the sense that in Botswana, I don't know, we don't have unions or agencies or whatever as entrepreneurs. We come together.
We have a business Botswana.
Also, all
you don't want to say more, eh?
Yeah, they happen to be more centralized. I think they could be doing more. I happen to not be aware of a lot of things that they are doing, that they should be doing, right? So we don't need things that exist for the sake of existing, just because we have business Botswana. I think we need to have agencies that
but what can we do now? The government wants to increase our taxes, and we're in the middle of COVID. We seem to be just helpless.
It's very difficult
helpless spectators.
It's very difficult to fetch water while the house is still burning to try and quench the fire. So I think this could be a learning curve where we say, look, perhaps it should be important for us as entrepreneurs to unionize, create platforms whereby we can actually go, sit down, chart a way forward, and also try and engage the government more.
Do you know that 2 years ago, when there was an adjustment in VAT for foreigners, and also an adjustment in this tax, what do they call it? Transfer duty.
Oh yeah.
There was very little consultation with the entrepreneurs. It just came as a law. It was passed in Parliament.
I think
and there was no, like, we're just at the tail end of it.
That is, I happen to always think that our government runs our economy like a board, a company board, whereby they just take company resolutions and then they pass it down without the input of people. I think that is a culture that we need to change. I think also it speaks just on our culture of like our political culture, it happens to clash with government. Wherever now, I think our political parties are more or less of babysitters of the economy, right? So I think sometimes people will blame the political parties for the initiatives. Well, actually, it's the bureaucrats sitting in government offices who come up with these policies, because on the side of the political parties, they fail to offer solutions and policies that they should be given to the bureaucrats. Now is the other forward. Wherever now, however, government, I come with a policy and then I tell police, no, look, this is what I want to do. Instead of the political party, look, guys, we need to do 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is another problem that we seem to have in our country.
What is your take on the recent uproar with the likes of ATI and others, which came out on social media, where there was a cry about, economic sabotage of businesses, and there was some people even went so far as to describe it as bureaucratic sabotage from the point of view of civil service, and where there was a feeling that foreigners are somehow advantaged over Botswana.
That is a very true view, because that's why the government also introduced economic transformation, because we understand that our economy patterns seems to show that the economy is in the hands of the few, and that few, most of them are not Botswana, right? Which means a lot of Botswana continue.
Well, some of them are Botswana, but not indigenous. Some people want to make that distinction, which unfortunately doesn't always work for us, because sometimes there are committed non-indigenous Botswana who are painted with the same brush.
That's very true, but I think that also raises a point where now you have to understand the cultures of the people that are also running the economy. Also, them themselves, they happen to run the economy more or less like a mob or unit, right?
A mob?
Yeah, I don't want to use mob. Mob happens
a cabal, like a mafia.
Yeah, but
you don't want to say those words.
Yeah, because I think when I say mafia, I mean that it's a very organized, close-knit system. Wherever now they do business with themselves first. It's only when now on the
like
last
an old boys network.
Yeah, like a boys not like the Stellenbosch mafia, like the ones in Cape Town. So they do business mostly with themselves. It's only in the last resort where now they can reach outside their culture, their religion, and say, hey, okay, I think we can do business with this one. So it's a huge challenge that we seem to have.
But don't you think, as people talk about it, they are becoming aware of it more, and there seems to be an effort? I don't see the noise being as loud as it was last year. I think there's an effort for some of these non-indigenous businesses to invite Botswana in and to reach out a bit more. Don't you think there's improvement?
I think some are trying. I've seen one of them reaching out and say, look, I have these opportunities, come to me, let's sit down and talk. But also some of them, I don't know if they are changing how they are doing things because they are actually conscious and want to see things better, or now they are doing that as a reflection of the voice and say, hey, look guys, we have to do things or else now they are onto us, right? So it's something that I'm still trying to understand. Are you changing how you've been doing things because you want to see things better, you want to include Botswana to the mainstream economy, or you are changing because now you see that if you don't change, like South Africa is the black economic empowerment policy. However, now white people started including black people in boards and opportunities, not because they want to, but because they feel like they won't get the opportunities. For instance, when you apply for a tender, they say, okay, where's your BBE license? How many black people do you have in your board? So now they were affording black people these opportunities to fulfill the quotas.
Should we do that here?
I don't think we should. It's very difficult. I'll give you one of the reasons why South Africa has failed to transform the economy from white people who happen to have 90% of the white people are 5% of the population, but they control 90% of the economy, right? So now what happens when you do that is that you don't transform the economy. I happen to call it co-opting.
Co-opting?
Yeah, for instance, transformation is whereby you try and bring more people into the economy who have students through new businesses, initiatives. But then when you go to Mr. Mogobe's companies, hey, Mr. Mogobe, okay, you own 100% of black. I want you to give 20% to so and so. I don't think that's not transformation. That's just co-opting, right? So, and then co-opting can transform the economy. That is why also South Africa seems to have its own challenges.
I raised this question with Ram when he was here as my guest, and he argued that it's a job of the regulator, speaking specifically of Bank of Botswana. And this was in the context of making funding available for indigenous businesses to push them. And he says that the regulator need to do what happened in India, which is to say, to allocate a certain percentage of any lending. In other words, banks should be instructed that a certain percentage, let's say 40%, should be allocated to lending to these people. And only 60% of your lending is to, and you have to meet those quotas, otherwise you are not allowed a license. Do you think that idea can work here?
It can work, but it's also subject to a lot of things. Like I was saying that sometimes you're going to give 40% or you're going to reserve 40% to somebody who's not even ready or willing to be an entrepreneur, or doesn't even have the necessary skills, expertise, or even the hunger for entrepreneurship. So that is why also, I mean, all these things have to come together. One, you create a culture of developing entrepreneurs, reserving certain opportunities for them, right? So it's just like leaving inheritance for your kid to run your businesses, who doesn't even have the expertise to run your business.
Doesn't even turn up, doesn't even attend meetings with you.
And that is the challenge. I think also we have to find the ways of really changing our tenderpreneurship system. I think that has killed our economy. I don't think tendering is real entrepreneurship in my view.
They call it tenderpreneurship.
Yeah, it's something that I don't.
But what other system is there? I'm speaking as a procurement specialist, having been part of the ICRC for over 8 years. What other system is there for government to provide products and services other than a transparent system of procurement? So tendering is sometimes is both a good and an ill at the same time.
Well, I'm not really against tendering itself. I'm just against the way that we happen to run our tendering system, right? Because we have created this false narrative that the only way for you to make it is through tendering. And then with tendering, and then especially for construction businesses, you are not really making anything. In any economy,
because they're looking for the lowest.
You see, so any economy that is not manufacturing anything, then is sooner or later it's going to crumble. So I think for those economies, I think that the government could be doing more by actually taking some of the projects through its department. I think the government has a department called Department of Construction, if I remember very well.
Yeah.
So also the government has outsourced so much that, for instance, I want to give you an example about security companies and cleaning companies. Right. So the government has outsourced so much of those services to the private sector, giving few people access to huge sums of money, as opposed to like just the government hiring 100 cleaners. Look, you're going to be cleaning all these offices, but then one person is going to get a 5 million pula tender, pay 100 pula, 1,000 pula. You see how the odds are stacked against us.
Yeah, but you also want, as a government, to encourage entrepreneurship, to encourage those risk takers who start these businesses.
I happen to agree, but I think there are other sectors that we could try and rather push people to enterprise in.
Now, we want to conclude by touching on the path to socio-economic prosperity. After this, you get to ask me a question, by the way.
Okay.
What do you believe is a path to socio-economic prosperity? You're really talking about a utopia, isn't it? How do we get to that utopian entrepreneurial state?
I think that the easiest and simplest way for us, as the financial crisis has shown, and then as COVID-19 has shown, a certain economic empowerment is our best pathway in terms of diversifying the economy. I think that the more we put the economy in the hands of Botswana, the better chances we stand of actually diversifying. Like I was giving a chance of Donald Trump. Barack Obama came up with these policies in 2012, but then the benefits were seen only, rather 2008, but they were seen 12 years later.
Yeah.
Which means now, right now, there are
Trump was only happy to take the credit.
Very true. Which means there are some things that we need to be doing now, so that maybe in 12, 15 years, you can actually reap the benefits, right? For instance, let's say that we want to create electric car, right?
That was somebody in the manifesto somewhere of a certain party. I won't mention names.
Let's say we want to create an electric car. Do we really even have the components or to set up that particular industry? So one of the things that I want to give credit to Trump was that when he became president, he was like, we are losing a lot of jobs to foreign car manufacturers, right? because now we have a weak copper and steel industries, right? Because now you realize that China and other countries, or Russia, or all these countries that happen to manufacture cars, they are able to produce cheaper cars because they have been able to protect their own industries. So then Trump came up with policies to protect the mines, which actually manufacture the steel and the copper that happens to go to the cars.
Yeah.
Because he was conscious of the fact that for you to have a manufacturing industry, you have to have raw materials. So now I'll come back to our own country. We say that we want to manufacture an electric car. We have closed mines that were producing copper, steel, all these things that are very necessary. Which is that you're not even thinking of the things that you should be doing in the end. So now you can imagine now we have to import all these things that we have in our own
all
country.
the raw materials.
All the raw materials. We can't even compete with the cheapest cars in industry, right? That's why I see that before we even talk about electric cars, we need to talk about things that
the components
are necessary for us to do certain things. And then I think as an entrepreneur, you might know how difficult it is to start a business. Before you even saw this building, you have to go to an architect, do all these things that take years. Which is now, even if I was to come up with an idea of starting a factory today of manufacturing cars, I don't think 3-4 years will come before even we get to see the first car, right? And now before the first car, the raw materials. Also, you have to look at our education. Do we have graduates who can actually do this thing, right? Mechatronics, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, all these skills that are important, right? So that has been our problem as a country. We want to do things, but we haven't actually put the work or put the necessary systems in place that can actually help us do the things that we want to do. Also, I think I'm happy to see the new CEDA regulations. They've reinvigorated our entrepreneurs. I don't know if it's a false promise but I think I've seen a lot.
Someone said that the old policies are still in place pretty much, but I don't know.
They came into place, I think, maybe towards the end of last year.
Yeah.
So I think maybe towards the year I will see the CEDA report to see how many have been funded, how many have rejected, and then maybe see a lot of success stories.
It's too early to make a judgment.
It's too early to tell.
Mr. Kgasa, this is the part of the show where you get to ask me a question, any question of your choice.
I'm actually interested in how you actually managed to do this. How did you come up with Mogobe Plaza?
I mean, it was largely a mixture of serendipity and circumstances just coming right. Because I had tenants. I beg your pardon. I had clients as a lawyer who were involved in real estate. So I asked them, and they helped me, and we put together a substantial tender, which we then submitted when these things came up for tender. And then it was a matter of deciding that, look, in 2012, end of 2012, I literally left the law firm. And then 2013, I relocated to the CBD, working with contractors, wearing the makarapa and the boots, and actually coming here every day to make sure that the job is pushed. So it was a labor of love, because I wanted to see property taking shape. I had already been involved in property, having been influenced through mentorship with I've been mentored by Mr. Jamali, Mr. Muni, Mr. Maham, people like that who are involved in real estate. So it was just really a matter of expanding and doing a more substantial project. So it was a result of being sufficiently motivated and being sufficiently inspired. They call it inspirational action, where it's not just action, but you're inspired action to do something, to make a difference. And also the idea of accomplishment, the idea of leaving a significant legacy contributed to that sort of thinking.
And then one last question, how was the transition from law to business bit? Because even when I was in primary school, Mr. Mogobe is a lawyer. So
well, it needed a bit of a I'd like to say a bit of a brain transplant, because what happened, I had a situation, a cataclysmic event, I've explained it before, which triggered this, but you had to change your mindset completely, because the way lawyers think is very, very different from the way entrepreneurs think. So through personal development, there was a time when I was devouring a book a week and going to all the seminars I could get my hands on, going to YouTube and going everywhere to try and get the necessary motivation to energize myself. And I continue to do that. I have a morning routine, a routine which involves about 2 hours at least of content absorption. For me to be able to share content, I need to be able to absorb content to develop myself.
Input, output.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Now, as we conclude our time together, Mr. Kgasa, you have to look at that camera, that one, and share with that viewer, as an economist, that entrepreneur, words of inspiration, words of motivation and empowerment that you can leave them with.
I usually encourage people just to take pleasure reading. It's one of the best hobbies that you can actually take as a person. Like you were saying, you can only put out what you put in. I think also, I was reading Barack Obama's book where he was saying that sometimes success is more or less about showing up, right? I think a lot of people tend to give up before they even try. So sometimes all you have to do, you have to be in the right place at the right time and actually just show up, and then the rest will follow. I think Mr. Mogobe has always been in the right time, in the right places, with the right people who happen to have pushed him in the right direction. I think look what he has made now.
Would you like to share your contact details if people want to get in touch with you?
Okay. You can call me or WhatsApp me on 7595-8476 or email me at maatla@sunvest.co.bw.
Thank you very much for taking the time out. Thank you for your wonderful ideas. There's a little bit of gloom and doom, but there's also lots of hope in what you've said. So thank you very much for taking the time out.
Thank you so much, sir.